Good evening, residents and citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. I am your host, Azard Gumbs, Deputy Political Leader of the People's Action Movement, and I welcome you to another edition of Unfiltered. Tonight, as we approach another independence anniversary, we reflect on our nation's journey, a journey marked by struggle, vision, and sacrifice. Independence was not dropped on us like a bomb. It was built carefully through consultation and preparation, and it remains one of our greatest accomplishments in our history. Tonight's program will be divided into four parts: the road to independence, preparing for independence, the accomplishments of the People's Action Movement, and the way forward. The road to independence was not straight, nor was it smooth, and for years it was marked by Labour's failed attempts to deliver what they promised. In 1966, Labour went to London for a constitutional conference. They had pledged that all parties with seats in Parliament would be included. But when the moment came, Pam was deliberately excluded, and a clause was inserted into the Constitution to block Dr. William Herbert from Parliament. This was not independence for the people, it was manipulation for power. There was no public consultation. Instead, the result was division and protest. In Anguilla, opposition boiled over, leading to secession. In St. Kitts, repressive laws like public meetings and processions ordinance stifled free speech and provoked unrest. In Nevis, frustration grew over the lack of local councils, fueling calls for separation. And what was Labour's response? Robert Bradshaw famously declared he would drop independence like a bomb. That was Labour's vision. Independence imposed from above, without the voice of the people, without consensus, without preparation. In 1975, Labour tried again, pushing for independence at all costs, even at the risk of breaking the Federation. Pam opposed them, warning that unresolved issues with Nevis and Anguilla would make independence unstable. Labour won the election, but once again failed to deliver independence. Then the turning point came. Bradshaw died in 1978, Southwell in 1979, and Limor inherited a party without vision. That same year, Dr. Kennedy Simmons entered Parliament through a by-election. Britain had already signaled readiness to grant independence, but Labour had squandered the opportunity through arrogance and division. By 1979, the truth was clear. Labour had failed time again to achieve independence. It would be different. It would be a different approach under the People's Action Movement, a party that delivered for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. The general election of February 1980 changed everything. The People's Action Movement under Dr. Kennedy Simmons promised not to impose independence on the people, but to prepare the nation for it with care, transparency, and consultation. Between July and October 1982, the People's Action Movement held 21 town hall meetings in St. Kitts, with additional sessions in Nevis. Citizens' voices shaped the new constitution, raising issues such as equal status for women and qualifications for parliament. For the first time, the people were the center of the independence process. The timeline speaks for itself. On July 26, 1982, White Paper on Independence tabled in Parliament. On August 23rd, 1982, Financial Implications of Independence published. On September 26, 1982, massive PAM convention endorsed independence. And on October 5th, 1982, Parliament unanimously approved independence resolution. November 1982, Britain agreed to host Constitutional Conference in London. At the London Conference, the People's Action Movement delegation stood firm, while the Labour opposition tried to disrupt and even walk out at one point. Nevertheless, the Constitution was finalized and unanimously approved. On December 16, 1982, Dr. Kennedy Simmons closed the conference with words that reflected PAM's philosophy, and I quote, "We will not drop independence on this country like a bomb, but we are beginning the process of seeking this necessary constitutional advancement," end of quote. And so, unlike Labour's failed and reckless attempts, the People's Action Movement delivered independence the right way, through consultation, planning, and unity. The result was historic. On September 19, 1983, St. Kitts and Nevis proudly raised its own flag for the first time and entered the world community as the newest independent nation, thanks to the careful and successful leadership of the People's Action Movement. Independence was not the end story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. And under the People's Action Movement, that chapter was filled with vision, progress, and transformation. When the People's Action Movement led the Federation into independence, it understood that true freedom meant more than raising a flag. It built a society where opportunities were created, where rights were expanded, and where the foundations of a modern state were laid. The People's Action Movement lifted burdens imposed by personal income tax and abolished personal income tax, freeing families and businesses to grow. It advanced women's rights with 13 weeks of paid maternity leave, among the first of its kind in the region. It introduced school meal programs and early childhood education program, ensuring that no child will go to school hungry and that every child will have a fair start in life. The People's Action Movement invested in education by establishing the College of Further Education, today's CFBC, and the SELF program, which provided textbooks across the Federation. It expanded secondary schools and introduced skill programs to empower the youth. The People's Action Movement stood with workers, providing dull season payments for sugar workers, legally securing sugar lands, and lowering the voting age from 21 to 18, giving young people a greater voice in shaping their future. The People's Action Movement also modernized the economy. It pioneered the Citizenship by Investment program, built Port Zante, completed the Birdrock Deep Water Port, and secured funding for the RLB International Airport. It opened roads that connected communities. The Kennedy Simmons Highway and the bypass we still use today. It expanded telecommunications with Scantel and upgraded Newcastle Airport with night landing lights. Under the People's Action Movement, St. Kitts and Nevis achieved one of its highest levels of per capita income growth in Latin America and the Caribbean. In short, the People's Action Movement turned the promise of independence into real, tangible progress that still shapes our daily lives. But independence was never the end of our journey. It was the beginning of a greater story, one that we continue to write today. And tonight, I want to pause and share my personal views. These are not necessarily the official views of the People's Action Movement, but they are the ideas and hopes I hold as a candidate and future member of parliament. I share them not to overshadow our leadership, but to add my own voice to the national conversation about where we go next. Our party leader, Natasha Gray Brooks, has made it clear that her vision is a people's first agenda, an agenda that puts fairness, opportunity, and dignity at the center of governance. Many of the things I speak tonight connect with that vision and are already reflected in the People's Action Movement's 2022 manifesto and philosophy. For example, I believe that one day St. Kitts and Nevis should take the bold step towards becoming a republic, with a head of state chosen from amongst our own people. That belief is also reflected in our 2022 manifesto. Economically, I believe in a country where the private sector drives growth. This is not just my personal view. It is the philosophy of the People's Action Movement, which has always sought to promote an environment where businesses can thrive, entrepreneurs can succeed, and every citizen can share in prosperity. At the same time, I personally want to see affordable homes for citizens, sustainable practices that protect our environment, and a federation that can feed itself and reduce dependency on imports. We must also recognize the limits of depending so heavily on the Citizenship by Investment program. While it has served its purpose, our long term strength lies in diversifying into tourism, agriculture, renewable energy, technology, and the creative industries. This, too, echoes the People's Action Movement's push for broader economic transformation. On governance, I strongly hold that we need constitutional reform to strengthen democracy, safeguard fairness, and finally put an end to the cycle of political victimization that has held us back for far too long. And I envision a federation where healthcare is strong and accessible, where youth have meaningful opportunities, and where workers are protected by stronger laws. These may be my views, but they are also rooted in the same guiding principle that the People's Action Movement has carried. That leadership must put people first, create opportunity, and prepare the Federation for challenges ahead. Just as PAM once prepared us for independence through consultation and care, so too must we prepare our nation for its next chapter, one of unity, fairness, and real progress. The journey to independence was never a straight road. It was filled with Labour's failures, setbacks, and lost chances. But where Labour faltered, the People's Action Movement succeeded. We prepared, we consulted, and we delivered. On September 1983, St. Kitts and Nevis stood proudly as the newest nation, as the newest independent nation, not because independence was dropped on us like a bomb, but because it was built with care, unity, and vision. Since then, the People's Action Movement has shown what strong leadership can achieve, abolishing personal income tax, investing in education, empowering workers, and building the foundation of a modern economy. That is our legacy. As deputy leader, I stand in solidarity with our political leader, Natasha Shanigre Brooks, to continue on the foundation laid by the former leaders of the People's Action Movement. And I support her fully with her vision of a people's first agenda. Tonight, as we celebrate independence, let us remember it is not just a date on our calendar, it is a responsibility. A responsibility to lead with courage, to govern with fairness, and to build a country worthy of the next generation. This is Unfiltered. I am your host, Azard Gumbs. Have a pleasant night and happy Independence 42.